Good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock, and we'll get this program started. I'm going to let Detective Higgins introduce himself and get on to his presentation. Thank you all for attending, and this will be recorded. I'll make it available later through a YouTube link. And if you have a roster, please send it in to me, and I'll send a certificate back out to you. All right, thanks. And on to Detective Higgins.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me in to talk about a subject that I am very passionate about. This is the second webinar that I've ever done, so bear with me. I love doing this presentation in person just because I like to feed off the crowd and get crowd interaction. So why I am very passionate about this, and a little bit about me. My name is Eric Higgins. I've been in law enforcement for 27 years. I've been doing a version of this presentation, human trafficking, for coming up on 10 years. Tony and I, when we were talking about this, he brought up a good point. The Super Bowl is this Sunday, and the very first time I did this presentation was in Los Angeles, and it was in the summertime, right when Cincinnati was hosting the All-Star game. So I used that as an example of, hey, when there's big events in your area, human trafficking becomes more prevalent because these traffickers will bring in the victims because they know that's where the people are going to be, and people looking to party and looking to have a good time. So why this topic and why I've been doing this for 10 years and why I'm so passionate about it is I was working narcotics in Covington. It started in 2009, and that was, as I'm sure all of you are aware, because you're either first responders or work at the hospital, that was right when the opioid epidemic happened here in northern Kentucky, the greater Cincinnati area. And Covington, like every community, was hit hard. And so we were tasked, my unit was tasked to, assist with the prostitution problem that was created. I mean, there was always prostitutes down there, but like the opioid problem amplified the prostitution problem, at least in Covington. So that was my unit's goal, was most days, instead of buying drugs, we'd go up, we'd buy drugs in the morning and prostitutes at night. And then a colleague of mine at the university I work for said, can you help me with the presentation that I just mentioned out in Los Angeles? So it was on human trafficking. I was like, yeah, sure. She was like, since you work vice crimes, this would be useful because you can talk about your experiences. So when I started looking into what human trafficking was, because I could like recite the KRS, but like I didn't really know what it was. And just like all of you, I came into law enforcement to help people. And I quickly realized after starting doing research into human trafficking that I was not fully prepared. So I wanted to prepare the public and other first responders to help the victims of this horrific crime. So that's just a little quick background on me, why this is, why I've been doing this for coming up on 10 years, giving this talk and educating people about human trafficking. So what is human trafficking? Well, human trafficking is the business of stealing freedoms for profit. In some cases, traffickers trick, defraud, or physically force their victims into selling sex we're going to talk a lot about sex trafficking today, but there's an other side of this, which is labor trafficking. Um, but basically, it's force, fraud, or coercion. Now, those are the three elements that you need to hit the statute for human trafficking. Now, if the victim is under the age of 18, the force, fraud, or coercion, all bets are off. Like, you can go after the trafficker with that if they are a minor. But basically, all this is modern slavery. You are taking somebody's freedoms away and making them do something that they normally would not do. And a lot of it is because they're hooked on drugs, or as we'll find out as the presentation goes, it's because they um, fall in love with their traffickers. Um, so sex trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provisions, or obtaining of a person for the purpose of commercial sex. Um, Commercial sex acts is used by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which a person is forced to perform such acts is under the age of 18. And then I mentioned labor trafficking. Like I said, we're going to talk about it, but we're not going to get into it like we did sex trafficking. Labor trafficking is the crime of using force, fraud, or coercion to induce another individual to work or provide services. So the common types of that is like in the agriculture, domestic work, in restaurants, cleaning service, those kind of things. So I don't know if, and this is why I like to do this presentation in person, but like, because I would, and if you have a question, I do have the chat up, or you can just, I don't want to say interrupt me, but if I pause for a second, please speak up if you have any questions. But like, I would, I would ask the people, like, does this map shock you? If you go on the Polaris project, this is one of the first things you'll see. And obviously, this is the hotbed. Obviously, this is the United States, but it's a hotbed of where human trafficking is occurring. Um, Human trafficking is occurring everywhere. I know that there are some areas that are not like highlighted here, but with the internet, it's you know, with everything,
Hey,
crime
Eric,
evolves. Yes.
we're not seeing your slides move forward.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Anybody can suggest how I do that? Because did you see that one? What do you see? Do you still see the very first slide?
Yeah, the human trafficking.
No, I see a commercial sex act slide.
Okay. I must be off on my system.
What about, does everybody,
That's the heat map.
speaking of the map, can everybody see that?
Yep.
I'm sorry, who is the person that cannot see it?
Eric, that was me, Tony.
Okay. Anybody other than
Yep.
Tony?
Yeah, the chats, they're seeing it.
Okay.
It's something on my end.
All right. So I guess my point being, and if anybody wants to chime in, does this surprise anybody? The map of the United States and where the hotbeds are, or is this pretty much what you would expect it to see? What this slide represents is it is occurring everywhere in the United States, and like I said, with the internet, it has changed the dynamic of how the traffickers are trafficking their victims. So commercial sex act is any sex act on account of which anything of value is given to or received by any person. I'm going to ask a question. I am a teacher in school, and there's a young lady who is failing, and me being the teacher says, "Hey, if you give me a blowjob, I will pass you." Would you consider that human trafficking? Anybody? All right. Yes, that would be considered human trafficking because me, the teacher, is giving this person an A for the class, and I'm attaining a sex act for it. So yes, you could charge that teacher with human trafficking. And yes, it is underage. So yes, that does meet the statute. But what if I was a college professor and I did that to a student who was 19 years old? Would you still consider that a human trafficking? Yes, you would. So we're going to talk about different ways that these traffickers get these victims, and they are victims, but I'm going to use the correct term, survivors. So if you hear me use survivors, I'm talking about the victims of sex trafficking. So there's different ways that they get these um, survivors to do what they want. One of the things is called boyfriending in. And basically, what this is they make them feel like they loved. Most of the people who fall as victims of human trafficking have other things going on in their lives. So they might come from a broken home, or their family, their parents don't give them a lot of attention, or both parents work, or both parents are addicted to alcohol or drugs. So the um, the young person is vulnerable, and these guys will prey on their vulnerabilities. And what they do is um, learn about them. It'd be like if you're courting your wife or your significant other, your husband. Um, it's no different than that. They feel like they make them fall in love with them. They think that they're their world, and then they flip the script in a couple weeks and say, and as an example, they'll be like, "Hey, I can't pay my rent this week. I'm going to have somebody come over. Will you have sex with them, give them the money, and help out? Because I've been paying all this to buy you jewelry or take you out to eat and all this other stuff that I've been doing for you. Can you do this for me?" And then they'll do it because that's the person that they're in love with. And then hook, line, and sinker, now they're having sex with multiple people, 7 days a week. I'm going to try to play this video. Hopefully it will work. Let me know if it does not, and then we'll just move on. Can everybody see this video or no?
All I see is a link to a YouTube video, Eric.
All right. Can you see the YouTube video or no?
Now,
All right, I'll move on. My apologies for this. Basically, you guys, this is being recorded. If you want to just go to this YouTube video and play it afterwards, it's impactful. Anytime you guys can hear from actual survivors of this crime, is I've been blessed to hear many survivors talk. It's more impactful when you get that from their perspective. So um, when you get this, please go to the video and just watch them. I think they're like maybe no more than like 3 or 4 minutes long. So next would be familiar trafficking, and this would be parents who sell their kids to pay the bills. Sorry about that. Parents who sell their kids to pay the bills, or unfortunately, We're talking about people who are addicted to some substance, whether it be alcohol or illegal drugs, and they need to get money to do that. So when they have jobs, you know, most jobs, especially like if you are acting funny or weird, they might uh, have you do a drug screen. So unfortunately, they have jobs for a little bit and then they get fired, or because of their addiction, they don't show up, so they get fired. So they have to find a way to pay the bills and live and support their habit. So, one of the things that they'll do, and it might just be because when they were young, they were trafficked themselves, would be to use their children to, they will traffic their children to get money to survive. Uh, child cra- Child trafficking is the recruitment and grooming. A parent sexually abuses a child themselves and offers the child to other for sexual gratification in exchange for access to other young children. Um, the child has been taught that this kind of activity is normal for the parents, and I'll just talk about the person in this video. Her dad was like a musician, and he would bring her along to his gigs, and then maybe he needed some more money, so it started with the band members having sex with her, and then he would like be pimping her out in the back while they're up on stage playing. They would go and uh, people would go have sex for money with his child. So those are different ways that trafficking can happen. But when you think of child trafficking, and when I first started doing this presentation, the movie Taken had been like released in that time frame. So when I would ask people what they thought trafficking was, it wasn't happening here in the United States. It was happening in another country, and people would break into hotel rooms and snatch people. Um, Through getting to know what this crime really is and what it is about, come to find out that, and I can speak for myself. I'm 40. I'll be 49 years old this year. The biggest thing when I was growing up, and we didn't have cell phones. I had a pager, but it was, the person parents would drop you off at the mall, and the person in the dark panel van with the no windows. That's what our parents, or at least my parents and the people that I grew up with, uh, had to worry about. Now, because most young people have one of these, which is a cell phone, um, unfortunately, that gives access to everybody. So, this is what child sex trafficking looks like now. People will, because of the internet and because of the anonymity, excuse me, the anonymousness of the internet, like you don't know who you're talking to online, and most kids are going to believe that they're talking to another kid, whereas that isn't the case. Um, I can tell you right now in Independence, Kentucky, that um, one of my partners is working a case where an 11-year-old was on playing roadblocks and somebody asked them a lot of very inappropriate questions about their body. Come to find out, this person is in Atlanta and they're probably in their 40s. So, because of the internet and the far reaching aspects of the internet, parents have to be cognizant of what their children are on and what they're doing. And because there's predators out there and they will do anything to, let's just say this guy convinces this 11-year-old to meet up with them at one point, and this does happen. It happens more often than people realize. And they then become a victim not only of human trafficking, but some kind of molestation, rape, sodomy. And unfortunately, this has happened in small town America, in big cities, and from East Coast to West Coast, North and South. It's happening all over the United States, and it's because of the internet and the access these terrible people have to children. So, child sex trafficking victims virtually always know their victims. So, that is true because most child sex victims are being trafficked by somebody that they know, whether they meet online or whether it be a family member, an uncle, a grandfather. I mention all these because I've worked and or seen cases where that is the case. Um, children are far more likely to be trafficked by someone the child already knows, trusts, than strangers. So basically, that's what I was saying. You don't have to worry about the guy. You have to worry about the guy in the panel van, but it's more often than not, it's going to be somebody that the child knows. I throw these up for shock and awe. Unfortunately, these numbers are probably higher than what they are because unlike burglaries, robberies, and stuff, this crime does not get reported like it should be. So, and I get all the numbers and statistics from the Polaris Project. If you get a moment, please stop by there. There's more research on there than what I'm going to talk about in this like 45-minute presentation. So if you're interested in learning more about this, Polaris Project is one of the best places to go. But right around 25 million people a year are trafficked. That number, like I said, is probably higher. It usually is in the top three of crimes. Drug trafficking is usually always the first, and arms trafficking and people trafficking rotate between 2 and 3. It's a $150 billion profit a year business. 71% are women and girls. 29% are men and boys. 75% are adults, and then 25% are people under the age of 18. So this is what this really is about. How do we identify them? Like I said earlier at the beginning of this presentation, like big sporting events, like if you go to bigger cities, you'll see billboards or like on telephone poles, like QR codes or advertisements talking about human trafficking. So how do we identify them and how do we help them? So indicators, and this is what this slide right here, being that you are first responders and you work at the hospital, this is the most important slide, and the slides to come are going to be more helpful to you in your job and how you can identify if these people are being trafficked or not. Most of them are runaways. Missing school. They have tattoos or brandings on them. Have a lot of hotel keys. Um, the big one for like ER and for fire and EMS, if they're responding to a scene where a potential victim could be, is if the person who's claiming that they are their parent or guardian is hovering over them and not letting them speak for themselves. So you doing your job trying to ask what their injuries are, and you would ask the kid because they're the one who's injured, the person who is trafficking them will usually chime up and won't let them speak. So if you could get them out of your ambulance or if you could get them out of the room, um, and I know SANE nurses get trained on this and how to identify people who are being trafficked and know what questions to ask. If you can get them alone, and that's why I bring up like with the big sporting events, like usually the only time these people are alone, the survivors, is when they clean up after, they whatever sex acts that they were made to perform. So I can give you an example, like um, end slavery or like the Salvation Army. They will go to hotels, and it's not like the Marriott downtown where you spend $500 a night for a room. It's usually like the low lane outlying areas where you can get a room fairly cheap. Um, they'll put on like the back of a bar of soap a QR code saying if you're being trafficked, because most all the trafficking victims have one of these, because that's how it's a form of control, and they know where they are, and if they don't answer, they'll get beat. So they can scan the QR code and it offers them help. But if you can get them away from the person who is like constantly hovering over them and answering questions, then um, you can ask your questions like if they need any help or do you need to get away, or you know most of them, unfortunately, for me, and if there's any other police officers in this um, session, like their traffickers are told not to trust the police are going to take you away, and they probably do the same thing with um, you guys, the firemen. If you tell the firemen what's going on, they're going to call the police. Or if you tell this nurse what's going on, they're going to call the police and take you away from me. Or, they play on your parents won't ever have you back, so don't tell anybody. I have a question. It says, what about continuing drug use if they're always found at or near a hotel? What can be an indicator? Um, Unfortunately, most of these people who are survivors are going to be addicted to some kind of drug. That's a way that their trafficker is um, uh, controlling them to make them do what they want to do. Because most people are not going to want to have sex with random strangers, 15 random strangers in a day. Um, the best way is, and this is, I, I like to have like a prop, like if I show up and I'm with, let's say, a teenage girl, like that could be an indicator that's just a father or daughter going into the hospital or going into a hotel room. But what about like if you see me in a car and there's a young female and I back my car up into a spot and the female goes by herself out to a room, they knock on the room and you see a male open it up. Would that be a red flag? Well, yes, it would be. If they're in there for like if you're still around, you see a young lady go into a room and then you come back out. Let's say you're getting a pop, or you guys are going out to get something to eat, and then you see the young lady come out and get in the car. It might behoove you to get the make, model, license plate of the car, try to get a description of the girl, try to get a description of me, the driver, and then call 911 and let them know, hey, I saw them going southbound on Dixie Highway. Um, this could be a potential human trafficking victim. A lot of the questions I get when I say call the police and get the tag, well, what if I'm wrong? What if that was just a father-daughter situation? Well, number one, most of this is done anonymously, and number two, would you rather make that call and feel better that you could potentially help somebody and not be still continuing to hurt? A lot of this, and I'm sure if you've worked in fire, EMS, at the hospital, and policing for any amount of time, like these victims might not be upfront. They might not want to get out of the life yet. So they might lie to you, or they say, yeah, I want to get out. And then like you make the phone calls, you call the social workers, get them the help they need. Most of the time, they're going to need help at the hospital first because they have, broken bones, bruising, gynecological issues. It could be pregnant, they could have STDs. So, we try to, and I know years ago with Terry Vitor, we put together a protocol, which I believe is still floating around, of each discipline with the fire, with the hospital, with the police, what you need to do when you come into contact with a potential victim. But don't be afraid to call. Um, if the police get them and everything is kosher, we're going to let them go. But you could potentially be saving a life if you make that call, or if you see something like that, call. And what I always tell people when I give this presentation, it's not like if you pull over to the side of the road and you're getting gas, and as you're getting gas, you look in and you see the clerk with their hands up like this, and you see somebody standing there with a gun pointed at their face. Everybody knows that that's a robbery, right? If you come home and you see your front door kicked in, well, you've been burglarized, right? So you know to call 911. If you're down on East 13th in Covington, or somewhere in over the Rhine, you see a car come up, you see an individual go over to the car, and they have a transaction, or they're just there for a short period of time, a hand-to-hand transaction could happen. So, I mean, those crimes are pretty easy to spot, whereas there's a lot of layers in human trafficking, a lot with, like, you have prostitution, which police officers are being trained not to charge people with prostitution, and you want to try to get them the help that they need to get off the drugs and to get off the street, or charge them with PCS, which is possession of a controlled substance, and try to get them the help they are if they are victims of human trafficking. So make the phone call. We as first responders, law enforcement, can't do this job without the public, without, and I realize that there's HIPAA issues and all this other stuff, but if we can get people trained up and talking about this and know what to look for, maybe we can help people get out of the life. I hope that answers your question. We've already talked about the overly controlling partner, visible signs of branding. If they seem tense or fearful, they, not everybody likes to go to the hospitals. Not everybody likes to talk to the firemen and the policemen. So, but everybody has probably seen that if they've been on the job for quite some time. It's, not making eye contact or very submissive. The reason why they act like this is because their traffickers are abusing them and, telling them not to talk, and, basically taking somebody who at one time could have been more confident and making them not confident at all. So if you see somebody who's like overly submissive or not making eye contact or seems very depressed or anxious, that could be a red flag and an indicator that they are being trafficked. So, a lot of these would be like if you go into restaurants or I'm not gonna lie, labor trafficking is gonna be a little bit more harder to find because, like, especially like in restaurants or hotels, most everybody does not see behind the curtain, like what's going on in the kitchen or what's going on, behind closed doors at the hotels. So labor trafficking is a little bit harder to identify than sex trafficking, um, but the same signs as sex trafficking could be with the labor trafficking, especially like overly controlling employer. Um, if you just happen to see like cots in the back, like most restaurants will not have like cots in the back where people can sleep, because obviously employers don't want their employees sleeping on duty. So that could just be something in the back of your mind. If you see something like that, that, hey, there might be a labor trafficking situation happening at this place. So for like you guys, the unexplained injuries or malnourished, um, at one of the end slides here, there's some things, resources. Like one of the biggest like movies that I start was a documentary called Tricked. And I'm not gonna lie, after I saw that, I was pissed. I was not only pissed that this shit was going on, I was pissed that I was in a position as a narcotics vice cop to help people. But for you guys being fire EMS and the hospital, like if you see somebody with unexplained injuries or they look like they're thinner than what they should be, going back to why I brought up Tricked, one of the ladies who was she was a college lady, met somebody at a college party, um, first time being alone, first time being away from her parents and being away from friends and family. Um, got in with the wrong crowd, and the next thing she was being told to get out. This was up in Boston, I believe. Told to get up on the track in Boston to make some money, and she would forego eating just to get a couple hours of sleep because she was working 19, 18 hours out of a 24-hour day. Um, so for like, if there's anybody from the schools, like chronic absentees or truancies, lack of confidence, um, few or no personal items. Um, everybody has an ID, like whether it be a school, whether it be a school ID or a state issued ID, most everybody has an ID. So if they don't have that, that's the reason why the traffickers take that, is so they won't go anywhere. Like, especially like in the labor trafficking aspect, if they come in here to this country illegally, they'll take away their passport so that they can't go anywhere. They have multiple cell phones, signs of drug use, um, fearful of authorities. Keep that in the back of your mind. Um, if you come in contact with somebody who just does not want to talk to you, um, that could be an indicator that they're being trafficked. Um, if it's hot outside and they're wearing a hoodie covering their arms, well, that might be an indicator that they're hiding signs of abuse. So it there's three aspects or three components of this crime, or three different players in this crime. So you have the traffickers, the buyers, and the victims. It's all about supply and demand. So if there wasn't a demand, there would be no need for sex trafficking. So who are the people? The victims can be anybody. Um, it doesn't matter your education level, your gender, your nationality, economic status, or your age. Anybody can become a victim of this crime. So especially like in third world countries or other countries other than the United States, you got to worry about um, corruption, political conflict, and we're talking about like child soldiers, um, or where they would like raid villages and they would take the boys and they would make them young child soldiers. Um, Cultural acceptance of the practice. I mean, especially like if this has been going on for centuries in other countries other than the United States, it might just be the norm. Especially like if there's a big fishing, and this is again going back to labor trafficking, but like if people rely on fishing, um, they will go out and like say, hey, your kids can come work for us and we can send you back money, which they do, but they're definitely not getting paid what they're supposed to, and they're working in very bad conditions. Good question, Tony. The question is there a racial breakdown that one race is more trafficked than others? Excuse me for a second. A lot of it depends on like where we are. Um, and unfortunately, I don't have those numbers. In the United States, it's pretty across the board. Um, the slide that I showed before, like where anybody can be trafficked, um, but in different countries, because of the racial breakdown, is not as diverse as here in the United States. It's going to be higher in some countries than others, but in the United States, race is really not a factor because they are just thinking about um, money. So the traffickers don't really care what they look like. It's can they be controlled and get them as much money as they can. I hope that answered your question, and that was a good one. Thank you. So social service providers, or what we need to do when we come um, in contact with a survivor of this. So a question that I usually get, why doesn't people just leave? If they are in an environment or if they're in a situation that they hate, and they are getting abused over and over again, not only by the people that they are being pimped out to or trafficked to, but by their traffickers themselves, why won't they leave this bad situation? A lot of it goes back to one of the first questions is, or first things we discussed was drugs. Where are they going to get their drugs? And that's why the traffickers give the survivors the drugs, is to control them. Um, so one of the first things we in the community that will help these survivors needs to do is get them into a facility where they can get off the drugs. And I'm sure at some point in your careers, um, you have come across somebody who is an addict, and that's easier said than done. It's no different than dealing with like a domestic violence situation. Why do like people who are involved in um, years long domestic violence keep going back? Well, love, or they are giving them something that they need. So in this case, for traffickers, especially like if they've been boyfriended in, they're getting attention that they've probably never gotten before at home. They're getting drugs. They feel like they're a part of something because most traffickers are trafficking multiple survivors at a time. So they feel like that they are involved in a, I don't want to use the word cult situation, but it's, they feel like they're sisters. And like I said, if you go in and you have the opportunity to listen to a survivor talk, please do. There's a lady called Rebecca Bender. She's one of the first survivors that I've heard speak, and I've read multiple books that she has written about this topic, and basically telling and outlining her story. And they really go into why they don't leave this bad situation. A lot of it just goes back to they're getting attention, they love the person that they're with, and they don't really, they sometimes just think that this is normal, this is life. And unfortunately, it's not, they can get out of it. But a lot of it takes people who are in the positions that we are, that come in contact and show a little bit of compassion and show that they care. Um, because quite frankly, they're being told that nobody cares about you except me. And if you're hearing that all the time, people are going to believe it. So if we show care, we show compassion, and we can have the answers for them and get them the help that they possibly need. Um, yeah, and that's what, if you ever hear Rebecca or you read one of her books, it took multiple times, but multiple times of people caring and saying that they care and want to see her um, succeed and get out of this life, that she realized, hey, I can do this and I can succeed, and I don't need to be in this life. I'm sure everybody here has seen this, whether it be in real life because you're working, or, this is, I got this from, I think, Faces of Meth. So the top left hand Is her first mugshot, and the bottom right hand is her last. And you can see this is over 1 year worth of this person's life. Uh, we've gone over a lot of this, so just make sure, like, one of the first things, if you become if somebody you're treating and helping, or you come across, like, make sure that you get them help, and if they have any physical ailments like broken bones, or obviously gynecological health is a big one. Make sure that they get STD treated, get on the drugs to get off of it. Make sure that they're not pregnant. Um, Make sure you treat their chronic illness. But that's the first thing you need to do, is get them physically treated, so then they can be in a position to move forward in their recovery. So we've talked a lot about this, the psychological impact of this. You got depression or anxiety, dissociation disorder, they self-harm, traumatic bonding, and then PTSD. So a lot of these, and especially like if you hear from them, um, and I'm sure, because I know in law enforcement, um, they've been teaching us about the victim mindset, and this is something you really need to dive into, um, so why they're doing what they're doing, and why, like, if you try to help somebody and they don't accept your help, don't get down on yourself. And this is what when I give this talk to officers, listen, you got to be patient with these guys, and if you continue to reach out to them and or come across them, be compassion, show compassion, and maybe one day, regardless if it's human trafficking, it could be, like I said, domestic violence or whatever other run that they go on, but you know they self-blame. Um, they lose their identity. They've been isolated from their family, so their family becomes the other victim. So, you know, whether you have a close knit friend group, I mean, everybody has like that same mentality. It's the same thing with the survivors of this crime. Like, that's one of the coping mechanism is they bond with the other people who are being trafficked. Um, they have a lot of fear, distrust, and quite frankly, at least in the law enforcement aspect of it, we did not do ourselves any favors when we didn't ask, like, for example, like back when I was doing vice crimes back in 9, 10, 11, and 12, like, I didn't ask because I wasn't trained to ask, like, certain questions. We just wanted, the businesses and the families were tired of seeing condoms and needles on the ground. They didn't want, like, John G. Carlisle or whatever business down there on Pike Street or Madison. They didn't want to see any of that. They were getting tired of it. So we just had to get the prostitutes off the street. And I can tell you, my partner and I arrested in an 8-hour shift. We arrested the same prostitute 3 times. He got her twice. I got her once. Like, they were just letting her out. So maybe we should have took the time to interview her, talk to her, and see why she's doing this, other than just thinking she's doing it for um, to get money for her addiction. All right. So obviously, their immediate needs are safety, basic needs. Um, so the biggest thing is, especially like with their immediate needs and like safety and temporary housing. Like, where do I turn to, or where do I go um, to make a phone call? And the Ion Center is one, Life Learning Center is one, the Welcome House, Catholic Charities. But if I talked to a patrolman, let's say a young patrolman that has only a couple years on. They don't know any of this. So um, it's especially like I know that most hospitals, and I don't think fire department, but they would talk to the police, their police department, or the hospital social worker. The social workers can get involved, but most people who haven't, don't know anything about this crime or know anything about like trafficking victims, they have no idea where to turn to. So that's why I bring up um, just those four just off the top of my head. To like, if you come across somebody and you can't get a hold of like your social worker, if you're fired, you can't get a hold of a policeman to get a police social worker or somebody from the cabinet who is a social worker to come down and help. Those are just a couple places that you could turn to get help. So long term, like case management, they're going to need a job to live. Let's try to get them some education, drug and alcohol treatment, uh, trauma specific. Most of them will have PTSD and anxiety. You got to get them in to talk to a counselor for that, and then if you can get them into like a residential treatment or trauma center, that would be great. So the last where I'm about done. I got 2 slides left. These are just the resources. This is Rebecca Bender, In the Pursuit of Love. That was her book. I am a college professor too, and the Tricked and Not My Life. The Not My Life, there is some sex trafficking, but this talks a lot about labor trafficking. Are two documentaries that I would show my students or make my students watch and write papers on it. Again, I got a lot of the resources from the Polaris Project and the National Human Trafficking Center. And then, like, if you don't want to call 911 or you don't think like the local police has the resources, you can call the National Human Trafficking Hotline or text Be Free, which goes to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And that's the numbers that you can use to call. We're at the end of my presentation. Anybody have any questions? And if you come across somebody, and you can write this down, or I think Tony has my contact information. But if you need to get a hold of me, if you have any questions, or if you come across a victim and you have nobody to call, you can call me. My number is 859-750-4612. And Tony, you can send this out to the class roster also. And my email is ehiggins, so EHIGGINS at cityofindependence.org. And that cell phone number I gave you was my personal cell. I always have that on me. So please call at any time if you have questions and or if you come across a survivor of this horrific crime. Don't hesitate to call, and I can, obviously, if it's in Kenton County, I can assist. If it's in Boone or uh, Campbell or even south of us, I can at least get you in contact with somebody that can help. Because that's the biggest thing, and I hope the biggest message is you come up with like, hey, maybe keep the stuff that I gave you in the back of my mind, but there are places and there are people that will help these survivors of this crime, and I'm one of them. And please don't ever hesitate to reach out.
Thanks, Eric.
No problem.
Eric, thank you very much.
No problem, Tony. Anybody have any questions?
Looking to see if anybody's used the chat.
Yeah, they're just saying thank you. And my pleasure. I'm glad I could do this. like I said, if you have any questions, shoot me an email or shoot me a text. Again, 859-750-4612. And be happy to answer any questions or assist you in uh, any way that I can.
Again, thank you. And if anybody needs a roster sent to them, sometimes the links that are included are secured and you can't access them. Just send me an email and I'll get you a roster. One of the, I guess, co-classes along with human trafficking is a sexual violence awareness class that's required by Kentucky Board of EMS for all first responders. Um, that's now required every 2 years. So if you haven't had it recently, you may want to dig in and get it. It is available through uh, Kentucky's website, KBeam's website, and it's an online class you can do. If there's a huge need, I am an instructor for it and would be willing to throw one together through this type of system if people want to reach out and if they need that. And the pediatric abusive head trauma class, that again is every 2 years as well. But I really feel this class that Detective Higgins just put on is something important to us. We see it and we probably don't always recognize it. And anything we can do to help somebody out of a situation, make their life better is always a win for our team. But if nobody else has any questions, I certainly appreciate everybody's attendance. Again, I'll have this online. So if other shifts want to watch it, you want to go back, and please reach out to Eric if you've got any questions. If you want to help him, help others. It's a great program, and I thank you all for your time.